Welcome, everyone. We are so happy to not see, we don't see you. We're so happy to know that you're there. We see the numbers coming up, the numbers coming in. I will say one thing. Well, no, see, we have a question for the group as they're coming in. What is that question, Michael?
Oh, the question is, today is, amongst other things, it is dance day today, official dance day. So what is your favorite dance to do, or that you know how to do? Put in the chat box, either one of those. You know, what moves do you got? What's your favorite dance to do?
Okay, all right, we're getting some answers.
It could even be the happy dance.
All right, good. Thank you, everyone, for answering our questions. We see them coming in. Good, and yeah, you're doing as Sanjay has always asked, and that is to make sure that you send. Most of you are sending it to everyone. So when you're doing your chat, you have the option to send it to all panelists or everyone. Send it to everyone, if you would, please. We don't want any of this good stuff not to be seen by everyone. So as we're coming in and doing that, again, if you're just now coming in, we're asking you to put in the chat what your favorite dance is, and it should be a dance you can do, all right? So do that, and Mike is doing the happy dance for us. It's a little bit of a modified version of the happy dance.
Mike's dancing to the music that's playing.
Panelists and attendees, our friend Jerry says. Panelists and attendees, yes. That is what you want to click on, panelists and attendees. Also, as we're coming in, and that's because I don't want to spend too much time on it during the body of the show, but I want to thank, guys, we have the best listeners. We have the best audience. We really do. Because yesterday, I sent out an email to everyone who was registered asking if they had received an email from Zoom about this event, the regular obligatory 24-hour and 1-hour reminder that Zoom is supposed to send out. And 60 of you, 60, actually took the time to respond to us. And all 60 said, no, we did not get the reminder. So anyway, I have been developing a relationship with Juan Luis of Zoom technical support today, and they really are working on it. They say they've never heard of this. So we're the first, we have broken Zoom. We're the first people to have broken Zoom in this way. They said they've never had this situation happen before.
Oh, sure, they always say that.
I know. So anyway, hopefully they're going to fix it.
One more small talk thing. Michael, why are you wearing a pink shirt?
Well, but thank you, Sanjay. I am specifically purposely wearing a pink shirt today because in Canada, it is a pink shirt day, a day to talk about anti-bullying. So it is official pink shirt day. So to support to show your support.
Do you know the root story of where that actually comes from?
Yeah, you're about to tell us.
I'm about to tell you. So it started in Nova Scotia. There was a kid who was in grade 9 who was bullied for wearing a pink shirt. So that day there were two grade 12 students who went to all the stores they possibly could find and found all the pink shirts they could possibly find and made all their friends wear them. The next day became Pink Shirt Day. And so the story goes, he was wearing pink because his mother had breast cancer and he was trying to support her. And so they found the story, they rallied behind it, and it just became a big movement. And it's a national celebration now.
Well, and it's spread to other countries too now.
Yeah, it has. It's got international reach. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Did it spread to the United States?
Yeah, I think it's in the U.S. too.
Okay. All right. Good.
Not the same day. I think they might do it on a different date.
Okay. We're getting a lot of people telling us that they're wearing pink too. So that's great. But why don't we jump into our discussion about culture? Any objections to that? All right, great. So again, thanks everybody for being here today. We're going to talk about a culture of development. It's not just about getting a promotion. And I think you know where this comes from. The whole idea behind what we're talking about is, for years and years and years traditionally in many organizations in the US and Canada and abroad, kind of the thing was that if you wanted to get a promotion, or if you wanted to develop yourself in your career, it kind of was synonymous with getting a promotion. And often that meant getting a promotion into management. But guess what? Not everybody aspires to be a manager, right? And so in the last few years, well, maybe the last 10 or 15 years, I've been hearing an awful lot more about, how do we combat this? Because it does have some downsides. And so the first, I guess, thing I want to talk about is why is this a culture issue. And then I'm going to ask my buddies here online on the screen what they think about it, because they know and think more better stuff than I do about it, I think. And I want to hear what they have to say. And we also really want to hear your comments in the chat. So who's our chat herder today? Oh, Sanjay. Sanjay's the chat herder. I'm the cat herder. And Mike is the pink shirt wearer today. And so anyway, if you have comments and questions, Sanjay's going to be monitoring that, and we want to bring it up. But anyway, culture. So the first time I ever heard about organizational culture was about 30 years ago, and it was in the context of looking at the work of Dr. Edgar Schein from MIT. And I will never forget what I learned all those years ago, and I love the way Dr. Schein put this, and that is that culture is rooted in assumptions, and it is often the unquestioned assumptions in any organization. And he says assumptions lead to behavior, behavior leads to outcomes. So if you think about it, in some organizations, there has been traditionally this assumption that being a man, I'll just put it this way, being a manager is better than not being a manager, right? And so what behavior does that lead to? It leads to we pay managers better than non-managers. We kind of give them more respect, more esteem, more fun, more goodies, more perks. Yes, many would say more work, more responsibility, more stress, yes. And they really get more influence in shaping the organization. So if that's the case, guys, what are some of the downsides? What are some of the outcomes, the negative outcomes to those behaviors?
Well, one of the things that, and I've had this conversation for years with organizations, if someone is an engineer and they're a good engineer and they love being an engineer, we say, great, you love getting your hands in there and getting dirty and fixing the widgets or designing the component or whatever it is. And we say, you're such a good engineer, we're going to make you a manager. And what do? They rip and strip them away from what they love, what they passion, what they're good about. And this is deemed to be a promotion. When in reality,
deemed to be, yeah.
Yeah, and what in reality, what you've done, you've been compensating them more, but what you've done is you've actually stressed them out more. You've taken them away from their strengths, and it's actually a step back for the organization, because you took someone who was in it and loving it and firing all cylinders, and then you misplaced them into a misfit, and then you kind of go, well, why isn't it working? It isn't working because you're not feeding towards people's strengths.
Yeah, it's the other half of the equation, right, guys? Richard mentioned, I forget what you said about how people being promoted into management. But the other half, I forget what you said, but the other half of the equation is that there are lots of people that shouldn't be promoted into management.
Well, sure, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Of course, just what Sanjay said. And we see that time again. I just finished a fascinating book for any fans out there of the sitcom The Office, and it's all about the making of the sitcom The Office. And when they developed that series, they made it really clear. In fact, they had signs up in the writer's room that that dreadful boss, the world's worst boss, Michael Scott, was actually good at his job as a salesperson. And that's the backstory, is how he became a boss, because he rocks it as a salesperson. And they made sure to show that throughout the series, that any time he was doing sales, he was really good at it. He just sucked at the people skills, at being a manager, at being a boss, right? And we see that time and time again. So Richard, you asked, how is this a cultural issue? Well, everything is a cultural issue in my books. That's the lens I see everything through, right? Because this speaks to everything from our hiring practices and onboarding. Are we setting up expectations? Are we hiring the right people? Are we having that conversation about what opportunities are available for them? Are we creating a culture of open and honest communication and having those conversations about, as you alluded to, Richard, the unwritten rules? Are we creating a culture that is full of respect and trust and showing that we value our employees for the right reason? And I would suggest that if you work in a culture where you feel valued and respected and trusted, and you're engaged in the work you're doing, the desire to move up in the organization is probably going to be a lot less for a lot of people. Unless
you can contribute something at that level.
There's also an underlying assumption that everyone wants the same thing.
Right.
And it's that idea is if you don't want a promotion, you're doing it wrong. If you're happy and content with where you are, and you're not looking to go to the next level, then somehow you're less of a being. And it's been brought up. Carol and Stephen both referenced the Peter Principle. And if you don't know the Peter Principle, actually, when I first heard it, I thought it was a joke, but it's an actual real business concept, which is you will be promoted to your level of incompetence. So, we'll give you some responsibility. That's no problem. Great. We'll give you some more. Oh, that's no problem. Great. We'll give you some more. Oh, you're about to mentally crack. Great. We'll leave you at that level. That's where you now get to stay for the rest of your career. And so for some reason, we're considered less successful if we are actually rocking our job, content, creating value, but we're not rising the ladder. Then we're less of a human being. And one of my favorite quotes is, too many people climb the ladder of success only to realize it's leaning against the wrong wall.
Right.
So a lot of times we don't have that bigger picture. And when we bring that into context, it makes it clear that, sometimes the most valuable people are not managers or directors or executive director or whatever that fancy title is, but they just take their piece, they own their particular job, and they just constantly rock it day in and day out.
Well, think about it. I mean, most organizations, there's a lot more of a need for non-managers than there is for managers. And so the opportunities definitely are going to shrink as you kind of go up, if we want to say up in the organization ladder. So that brings us to the other type of assumption that is made, and that creates a different kind of culture. And that is that assumption that says not being a manager is just as good as being a manager. And, both talented and committed managers and talented and committed people who are not in management have a lot to contribute, and we value that. And when that's the assumption, I think that drives a different kind of behavior. And that behavior, some of it has to do with compensation. So now you don't have to have the M after your title or in your title in order to earn more money, because I think that is some part of it. And I just think it has a lot to do with the kind of people, the level of talent that an organization is able to attract, retain, and engage. So, if we can all agree that this idea of whether or not the organization develops people in other ways other than saying you have to get a promotion, and it's not always a promotion into management. Let's be clear about that too. We're not limiting it to that, but just this idea that I have to, keep moving up the ladder. And so I guess, we've talked a little bit about what some of the pitfalls are of this traditional up or out mentality and some of the advantages of it. I heard a phrase, there's a book that was written, the book is about 11 years old now, and it's called something that I didn't write down, but it refers to not the corporate ladder, but the corporate lattice. And I love that, the corporate lattice. And and some of you on the call may know of that book. It was written by two women, again, in 2010, who discussed that. So my question then, guys, is, by the way, the elephant in the room is that there is an elephant missing from the room. I don't want to call Jeff an elephant, but yeah, some of you may have noticed that our good friend Jeff Tobe is not on the call today. He is on another call today, and we all got to make a living. So sometimes we can't always be here, and that's why there are four of us. And we actually,
and by the way, we're thinking about doubling the admission moving forward. Just
whenever Jeff's not here, right?
Yeah.
And of course, as you know, we will sometimes have some guest hosts, as we are going to have on March the 24th. We'll tell you about that next time. Anyway, so the next question I have is, what are some ways that employers can offer development opportunities? All right, so if we say, okay, people do want to develop. Some people may simply want to come into the job, stay in the job, and that's fine. We love them, and everybody's fine with that. That's not going to be most people, and the organization does obviously need people who are willing to develop in some way. But if we say, all right, development does not necessarily mean promotion, then what are some ways that we can develop, or that people can take responsibility to develop themselves, so that they feel like there is a sense of development, but promotion doesn't enter into it?
Just before we go there, going to the chat box, I have a feeling that the book you're referring to is the Corporate Lattice, Achieving Performance in the Changing World of Work. I believe
that's exactly it.
Kathleen Benko and Molly Anderson.
That is exactly who it is. Yes.
That is
so,
not.
Yes, you put that.
That was all me.
Okay, very good, good. Thank you to the chat person who
Steve,
inspired
it was very
Sanjay
good.
with that. Yeah.
Um, and sorry, one more thing. The idea of kind of going back to our preamble, the idea of promoting people because you're a good engineer, let's make you a manager. Use that example is to me is as ridiculous as going to a professional hockey team going, you're the best player, you should be the coach.
Right. Yeah, but isn't that what happens sometimes? Yeah.
It happens 20 years later when they've had the experience, and then sometimes coaches pan out and sometimes they don't. But their ability to lead as a coach has little to do with them being a good player. But it is as ridiculous as saying you're in your prime, you're the best player on the team, therefore you should coach. What we need to do is create a structure so people feel valued and appreciated for what they are really good at. And generally speaking, when people are really good at it, they love doing it. So to take them away and strip them away and make them a manager and be giving this all the responsibility in this whole foreign area of newness is often a big stressor.
And then what do we do very often in so many organizations? We not only move them up, we then abandon them by not giving them the proper tools, the proper training, because it's a whole, what you're essentially saying, Sanjay, is it's a whole new skill set. They are totally different skill sets. And I think organizations that don't get this topic don't value or appreciate the importance of all those quote unquote soft skills around leadership, and they don't invest in leadership training properly. So one of the most horrible things I think we do, destabilizing things we do in so many organizations, is promote people without any training, without any support in how to do their new jobs. But to get back to Richard's question, so what do we do? And there's a whole host of things, right? And I think it starts, if we're looking for solutions to this, by having those really good conversations with all of our employees about what it is they want, what their expectations are, what does rock them in their work life, what are those motivational triggers that engage them in the work, and looking for other ways that they can do it. As you said, with the book, the Lattice thing, it could be a lateral move. It could be a move to a different department. It could be a different geographic place that they move to. It could be giving them more responsibilities in other ways where they aren't leading people. Maybe it's encouraging them to mentor or get involved in training fellow employees, so they do feel that if that's what they're missing, they get that sense of respect because they're put into a training role where they get to share their expertise. So there's all sorts of different
and I would say too, there's a lot of things you can offer that are not work related. So for example, if I don't let someone take on the food drive, or let someone decorate for the upcoming holiday, or whatever it is, because those kind of things give people a sense of potentially an artistic outpour, or if they're a very structured person, they love organizing things, and it gives them a sense of accomplishment, and it still benefits the organization, because then these people continue to rock in their current job and they go, I love this place. I love this place because I get to do my job and I'm really good at it, and they let me do these fun things. And we're creating an energy within the organization, which is a culture that moves us forward, that makes it fun to be here.
And I think also, what's important is to have those open, honest conversations again. So, we have to be careful that Bob really wanted that promotion and he's crushed, he's devastated because he doesn't feel valued. And our response is, well, Bob, we have a party coming up next month. Could you organize the party, right? We have to make sure we really are understanding what those underlying motivations are, and showing that we still value that person and looking for opportunities for how they can express that value.
But I would argue as well that doing something like that, giving and making those opportunities available to a wide range of people, can sometimes expose people's or demonstrate people's leadership skills or other kind of skills. Ask them to do something like that. It's not a promotion. They're not somebody's boss, but you look at that and you say, oh wow, this person really showed themselves in this. So we can maybe have a conversation with them about, hey, you did really well on this. Is that something that you might want to try to work into your career? So yeah, I think things like just expanding responsibilities. And some people are going to say, oh yeah, you're going to give me more work for no more money. There's some people who would embrace that and some people who wouldn't. And some organizations might say those who embrace it, they might be the ones who, end up doing the better job. But giving people, expanding their responsibilities, sometimes just giving them more autonomy around things, those are all ways that organizations are helping people to develop It's not anything to do with the promotion. Sanjay, what were you going to say?
I was going to say I did some work with, actually, first of all, Bob makes a point specifically talking about sales-driven organizations where they take their best salespeople and make them managers, and they're two exclusive skills. And again, they don't necessarily offer for training for them. I was doing some organization with a community living organization, and one of the things I thought that was really cool was they had what they called a leadership development track, and so the idea was, their next managers are coming from this pool of people. But here's what's cool and unique about it was they trained a larger pool than they were looking for. They said, we know a lot of these people are not management material, or they don't want to be managers, or they're not a good fit, but we still want them to have the skill set, because even in their current role, they will still benefit from it. So rather than, there's 5 potential candidates and 3 positions, rather than only training the 5 people, they're training 25 people. And so,
the more training, the more development, the better the organization can be. Sure.
Yeah, and it's the old cliche, right? Why would you train your people? You just train them when they leave, because the worst thing is you don't train them.
They stay. Yeah. All right.
I have a great list on my website on that note that I just remembered. I think it's called 16 ways or 17 reasons why companies need to invest in employee training and development. And it all ties into this, right? It's so important. But a lot of what we're talking about here, I think, is tied to respect and recognition and trust, and about, again, feeling valued, right? That's why a lot of people, I think, get so serious about wanting to be promoted, because it's a scorecard for them. It shows that my company respects me and values me. And even when we're talking about the money, even if people say without question, we'd all love to be paid more, and money can be a factor, absolutely. But it's not always a factor, even when people say it is. It's what the money represents.
Sure, yeah. And again, if we go to the idea that we respect management type people more than non-management type people more than, sure, everybody wants to be respected, so they're gonna aspire to that position. Another thing that we sometimes see as an organization, helping someone go from being more of a generalist to a specialist, and especially if it's an emerging need or an emerging technology or something, and then you can assign that person or persons to a particular project. An example, in my family life, my wife was the Y2K guru of the company that she worked for in 1999 and 2000. Now, first of all, there's some people say, oh, Y2K was overblown. There was nothing to it. It was no problem. The reason it was no problem is because we had millions of very talented, committed people all over the world keeping it from being a problem. It would have been a problem. I was a computer programmer in the 1980s. It would have been a problem, because everything that I wrote would have blown up on January 1st. Anyway, my point is this. Her company said, we need somebody to take on Y2K. And this was in 1997 that they began to do this. They gave that to my wife to do. She headed it up. She was not a manager. At the end of it, her reward was they made her a manager, and she hated it. So that sometimes kind of happens. So in her career, she's an IT person, very technical. She's been in technical roles. She's been in management roles. She is now in a technical role again, and the happiest I have ever seen her in her career. So those kinds of things can happen.
And on that note, Richard, of rewarding and valuing expertise and specialties, and back to the money topic, I know there's a lot of people that argue that this will be a trend in the future in workplaces, that managers won't necessarily be the higher paid person in an organization all the time, that a manager might have several people working for them that are paid more than them, because they're different skills.
Let's talk about that, because
we have a question here in the chat box coming from Stephen. It says, how do we manage the fact someone may not want a promotion now, but later on they develop to a point where they do want one, and they might be interested?
That is such a great question, because so I was talking with a friend of mine yesterday who, very traditional, he's retired now, but very traditional, up in the ranks with a large corporation. And he told me that 35 years ago, they wanted to move him and his family to a part of the United States that was not exactly a garden spot. There are places like that here. And he did not want to go, but he knew that if he turned it down, it would be the kiss of death forever. That is how it used to be, and probably still is in some ways. And so to Steve's question, that is an outstanding, I think, approach to look at. Yeah, but just because you're not going to take the promotion now doesn't mean that you have, dissed the company and you've insulted us, and so we're never going to bestow that honor on you again. I think it's just a whole different way of approaching it. That, good for you that you recognize you're not at that point yet. Let's help you get there, and then let's support you when you do.
It goes back to that trusting environment and open and honest conversations where you can say, I mean, isn't that awesome in an ideal world where people would say, you know what, I'm not ready for this. Maybe in 5 years I will be, but I want to learn more. I need to develop my skills more before I say yes to a position like that.
And that goes to a cultural issue. I think I mentioned this in the past. A friend of mine was doing his PhD on what he called healthy conflict. And this idea of being able to disagree in an environment and not be offended by it is paramount for being successful. So if someone says, hey, we want to promote you, and you say, I'm not ready, we'd hope that the culture would be one that it's like, okay, cool. And we will come back to you and we'll check in with you in 3 months, 6 months, or a year from now. Yeah. And hopefully the stars will align at that time.
Yeah, no does not mean never, right?
And one thing we haven't brought up yet, gentlemen, is I think there's a huge gender difference here too that we haven't touched on. We know that a lot of women, for a lot of different reasons than men, will turn down promotions or not be as anxious to move up the ladder as fast because they want to focus still on other priorities. And we need to have that conversation too, because there can be some big differences there. And I've talked to many women in large organizations where they feel that backlash of not being ambitious enough, that they haven't shown their ambition the way some of the men have.
Again, it just all goes back to assumptions, doesn't it? And not testing or questioning those assumptions. And if we really question some of those assumptions, I think we'll see a lot of them don't serve us very well. And we need to rethink those. But let's talk about the money thing, because all right, so let's say there's one camp that says, oh, well, it really is about the development. And, as long as you're having some development and they've invested in you and you're more, you're more skilled and you're more capable, and maybe even you're more valuable to not only the organization, but you're more valuable to the workforce in general. So we're going to ask you to do this, and it's going to mean more hours, and you're going to work more and more responsibility and more stress and all that. But no, we're not going to pay you any more money because your compensation is the development. I don't know very many people who are going to really sign on to that. What do you think?
I think it goes again to this higher level of what's the purpose. There might be people that do buy into that, and that's fine. That's their thing. But I think where we run the risk is when we start pushing, we expect people to be motivated or excited by something that we think is important, or the organization feels is important. We're pushing it on someone else. I'm excited about it because I'm excited about it. And so, the most effective way, the organization doing this most effectively understands what's important to them. And for some people, it's the social cachet of I'm a manager. And so maybe we don't give you that title, but we give you the cachet because that's more important than the title. So what I'm saying is, if we can get to the core and of what's important to the individual and tap into that rather than obsessing with the form and assuming because you have the form or the manager title, you're now, all this stuff.
Somehow, again, back to that assumption that you're somehow better, intrinsically better, because you're a manager.
Right.
Yeah. And in terms of the money thing, one of the lines I always use is money isn't always honey. We know from so much research that intrinsic motivators, like a sense of purpose, like pride in your organization, praise, having a creative outlet where you're allowed to be creative in your job, that those can be far more powerful than external motivators like money, like carrots and sticks. And we have to remember that. And there are lots of studies that show that these other things can equate to people being happier and more engaged in their jobs over the money. And one thing I remind people too, when often we don't have control over the money, most of us, unless we're way up the food chain, there's not much you can do about the money. So we need to focus on that other stuff anyways, because those are things we can focus on and have control over. And let's remember this too, that again, We would all love to be paid more money. I get it. Nobody's going to go to their pay people and say there's been some sort of horrible mistake.
Take it back.
20% more. I'm giving it back. You don't know what I'm doing down here, right? However, let's also remember, in the big scheme of things, there's so much research that shows there is not the great positive correlation between higher money and happiness in life. And what happens? There's the old hedonistic treadmill that happens. So you get a raise in your job, maybe tied to a promotion, maybe not, but you get a raise. And what happens after 3 months? Your raise becomes your new normal. And all of a sudden, if you're just focused on the money, that raise doesn't suddenly now feel like it's enough anymore because you've quickly gotten used to it. So
it's a matter
of faster on the treadmill, hoping to get that next level of money.
It's a matter of making the connection. So I'm referring to the chat box here. 2 things here. Don has mentioned a survey that said a Harvard study shows that 90% cannot go into management, 56% get into management, but cannot advance into leadership, and only 25% actually become leaders. So yeah, we need to keep in mind that most people are not going to rise to the top, and we still want to provide opportunities for them to develop and grow and feel successful and feel valued and appreciated. Along the lines of appreciation, Max made this great comment. He said one day he was meeting with the GM when his phone rang, and rather than accept the call, he declined the call, apologized for the interruption, and then they continued talking and saying, it was meaningful to him. And that's true. It's those small, meaningful things. I mean, that's what culture is.
That's a great example.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to play for just a moment the contrarian or the devil's advocate. I don't necessarily ascribe to what I'm going to say, but suppose somebody did and said, that's just a way of you getting more out of me for less money, and you're taking advantage of me. There will be people who might have that view. How do you help them to see that really isn't the case? Or how can you be open to the fact that, yeah, maybe it is? I mean, someone would say, okay, but I'm contributing more now. I'm helping the organization to earn more, and so I should be compensated for that. Is that not a reasonable way to look at it?
It absolutely is. The reality is maybe this is my cosmic view on the world. If you create value, you will get paid for it. And it might not be in every transaction evenly as it should, but overall it evens out. So it's not about doing bare bones minimum and a checklist that says, well, I'm supposed to do this and I'm supposed to do that, so I did that exactly. It's a matter of creating an environment, fostering the aura that people want to contribute to the organization. And it is not a checklist. So
it's not transactional. It's not bang, bang, bang. Yeah.
And it's not tit for tat either, because there's going to be times where you run and take the lead, and there's times where other person in the same team runs and takes the lead too. So depending on what it is, but what we want to be able to do is in any given project, we know that each person has strengths and they bring certain skill set to the table. And how do we work with one another and support one another and able to do that? There's an activity I've done for years where it's a little logic puzzle. I break people into groups and I give them this little logic puzzle with poker chips, and they have to try and solve it. And it's funny because I split them up into 5 or 6 people in a group, and they have one set of chips. And I purposely only give them one set of chips. The activity itself is really a one-person activity. It's a simple logic puzzle, and if one person is doing it, they can solve it usually fairly quickly. But the problem is you get 5 or 6 people, which is 5 or 6 different sets of ideas. And what happens is people kind of bastardize the solution. One person starts doing something and someone else jumps in, grabs the chips and goes, no, let's try this. And someone else goes, no, let's try this. And they're going back and forth. And what we don't do is we don't cater to people's strengths. So we assume because there's 5 or 6 of us, we all need to play. But the most effective teams are able to solve this quickest when they go, hey, Richard, you're really good at this logic puzzle. And they push the chips in front of you. And then Michael goes, hey, Richard, let me get you a drink, essentially supporting you in doing what you do. And I give you a little massage going, and I become your cheerleader going, go, Richard, you can do this, you can solve it. And so again, it's a similar idea is how do we know the strength of our individuals within the organization, and how do we support their strength and let them thrive? So again, it's not about trying to take advantage. It's because that's the other thing too, is when we let people in their sweet spot, they're loving it. They do it not because they have to, they do it because they get to. And that's fundamentally different.
And
I like that example, but I do have to point out, number one, that I would be terrible at a logic game, but I would take the massage and the drink. All right.
Perfect.
So,
so Richard,
Michael, you
I'm
have
just gonna
something to say,
back-
and then we're going to move to the next issue.
back to the money point though, and people saying, you know, it's a totally valid comment what you made, and I think again that's where we have to have an open and honest conversation and say, you know, here's the books. We can't, for whatever reason, offer you more money. What is though of value to you? And in an ideal organization, I think there's lots of room for creativity in a lot of organizations where you can say things like, you know what, we can't pay you more, but we can give you every Friday off, or every other Friday off, or we can give you a flexible,
or every other Wednesday,
or every other Wednesday,
every other Wednesday at 1 o'clock.
Well, whatever it is that person values, you know, get creative, get innovative, and look for those levers.
Yeah, and I think sometimes the luxury of a smaller organization is that those companies tend to be able to do that. I'm not saying the large companies can't do that. The fact is mostly the large companies do not do that, and smaller companies do. So it's great to have that flexibility to provide that. Kind of going back to something you were saying, Sanjay, on the non-transactional, not tit-for-tat kind of things. And one of my favorite quotes is attributed to Kimmons Wilson, who was the founder of Holiday Inn Hotels. And it was, I might get the wording a little bit wrong, but here was the gist of the quote, and that is, someone who never does more than they're paid for will never get paid for anything more than they do. You know, so it's not, you know, it's just not.
You always do what you've always done. You'll always get what you've always got, right? That's
and I think about that a lot. I think people who just say, yeah, I'm gonna spend the dice, you know, roll the dice on this, and maybe I'm not going to get paid more, but maybe it will come back to me in a good way, that way or some other way, somewhere on. And again, I think if, as you said, Mike, trust, communication, if those things are good, then what we're talking about can happen. So let me throw in the chat box, all kinds of conversations here.
Who is it? Frederick was saying that sometimes people go into leadership because it's about control, wanting to be able to manage and control their own fate. So, I mean, it's a good point. April says, I'd like to believe that most people get into leadership because at the end of the day, they simply want to make a difference. And then Shannon replied, I wish that were true. However, I've seen people move into leadership because of who they know, that connection factor. Yeah, and it's true, but I mean, the reality is this: in every organization, if the organization is long enough, I can promise 100% guarantee you, there's going to be jerks and there's going to be saints, and there's going to be good stuff.
There are people who got there the wrong way and people who got there the right way. Yeah. So let me throw in a wrench a little bit into this. Oh, come on. Let me throw a wrench into this question. What about if development means providing opportunities for education in some discipline that ostensibly has nothing to do with the job? What do you think? Is that development? Is there an argument for doing that? I mean, an example would be, suppose someone wanted for the company to pay, or let's say the company offered to pay for them to take foreign language, let's say German language training, and there was nothing that anybody could see so far in their job that could benefit from German language training. Or, you know, something else like that. Maybe a customer service agent in a call center who wants to take a course in economics from the local university. What's the benefit of that?
Huge fan of that. In fact, there was just 2 days ago an article from Harvard Business talking about that very thing, allowing employees to pursue their hobbies and how it can give them more confidence, how it can help them be more creative and innovative. In fact, as I read from the good book,
I thought that was the Bible when you say the good book.
No, this is the.
Oh, okay, sorry.
He meant a good book.
A good book, another good book. Employees at the UK firm, and this is their actual name. What if they regularly participate in activities where employees learn everything from exotic dance lessons, back to dance day, tree planting, trapeze lessons. Pixar has a Pixar University where employees take all sorts of courses not related to their job at all. So they can, if you're in Pixar, you can take all sorts of different artistic courses, health-related courses, all sorts of stuff that has nothing to do with your job, because they believe not only does it engage their employees, it just helps them grow as human beings, and it helps them be more creative and innovative. How cool is that?
Well, what
Very
is,
cool.
What I think of an MBA, right? And when I got my MBA, it was a total ripoff. I thought it said NBA. I thought I was going to play basketball. I didn't see a court once. Anyways,
You were too tall.
Exactly. So if you think about it, you take all these courses and you use a subsection of it, maybe 5% or 10% in your job. The other 90% is useless. And that's true about most degrees. So if we can justify that because it's normal and it's accepted and it moves you up, well,
that's a good point.
You know what? So all this stuff is helpful because it does two things. One, it develops pathways in the mind, which are translatable to other areas of the business. But the other thing, though, too, is it keeps people engaged and loving it and feeling welcome and feeling like their ideas and what's important to them are respected, and they're going to be more committed to the organization.
Well, and here's one thing I'm a big fan of too, is looking for opportunities for how employees can bring their personal passions into their work in some creative way. So for example, at Zappos, all the artwork is created by the employees, right? If you play piano, that's your passion in your own time. Why not get a piano for your company? And this person can play during the lunch hour. They can play during coffee breaks. They can bring their passion into the workplace. And there's lots of creative ways we can do that.
I love that.
And speaking of creative ways, Carol makes a great idea, which is the office pole dancer can entertain at the annual holiday party. So
so moving
not Christmas party to be politically correct. So that's fantastic. But pole dancer
moving right along. That's great. One thing that I want, just a quick question before we kind of roll into our farewell for the week, and that is, there are a lot of companies who have kind of built a reputation on developing people and not necessarily developing them for the purposes of promotion. And a lot of people say, oh yeah, well we generally talk about a lot of high tech companies that would do that, and they would have a technical track or a dual career track. That's one thing we didn't talk about, is kind of what are some of the models. I think some of the more common models are called a dual career track or a technical track, where people can continue to pursue not only financial growth, but career and personal and professional growth without necessarily being promoted, either into management or not. But here are some companies I'm going to put on the screen that do a pretty good job of some of these things. And you'll notice that they are not all high-tech companies. Yes, Google is. Bosch is, makes high-tech appliances. Yeah, 3M. We probably all know the story of Art Fry, who was the person who accidentally invented Post-it notes, and he was in an engineering position, not in a management position. He was never put in a management position because he didn't want to be, and he was so good at what he did. So his was a good example. But Rolls-Royce, Apple, rack space. But look, Kraft Heinz, Rust-Oleum, now there's a high-tech company for you. So there are many examples of companies who have prospered by making the assumption that being a manager is not necessarily better than not being a manager. So that's all I have to say on the subject. We're going to be coming to a close here in just a minute. Anything else, guys, before one of you tells us what is coming up on our next fun time together?
Do it.
Okay. Mike, I think it's always the guy in the pink shirt who's going to tell us what happens next time, or is it no?
Nope,
it's not. It's Mr. Sanjay now.
It's
the guy with the blue background that was done by his son. That's so cool. You have the best background of the bunch of us.
Exactly. So, first of all, thank you for joining us, folks. Join us next week.
It's so much fun every time.
Exactly. Join us next week where we cover the topic of we have to stop meeting like this. So what we're going to do is give you some ideas and things that we've seen to make meetings more effective, more engaging, and simply more fun. And that is going to be the topic for next time. Please do join us.
That would be March the 10th.
Hope to get Zoom fixed by then and get you your reminders. Tell one, tell all. Come join us.
Yeah, that's March the 10th, 1 o'clock Eastern. Anything else? Okay. Thank you, everybody. See you every other Wednesday.
Thank you all.
Cheers.
Enjoy your week.